Good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Richards, may I have roll call, please?
Yes, President Wade, members of the board, let the record show that 4 board members are present at this time.
Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I motion to approve the agenda. That would be Ms. Van Hook, seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. All right, Ms. Richards, you're up.
President Wade, members of the board, Ms. Johnson would like to share something with you on this slide. So I'll turn it over to her.
President Wade, members of the board, new to Higley this year, we will, for employees that qualify, will receive a market stipend. First, I'd like to explain the slide. So the market stipend for special education teachers - resource for new and continuing teachers this year will be $2,500 annually. That would be paid over the course of their contract. Next is a market stipend for a special education teacher, self-contained, new and continuing teachers. That would be $5,000 annually, again, paid over the course of their contract. And a market stipend for our transportation staff who have a school bus certificate. Administration is not eligible for this in this case because they do have a certificate, but they're not eligible. Would be $1,500 annually for all employees that fit that category of having that certificate. So a market stipend is provided when the current market is calling for something more than what we currently offer. As you know, we have a very difficult time finding special education teachers, both resource and self-contained. We found that some of our surrounding districts were paying this amount or more annually. We currently have a hard to fill, but that was a one-time stipend. That is a one-time stipend. This will hopefully make us more competitive. We have approximately, right now in special education, about 10 positions available for this coming year. So that will help us. Also, the market stipend that's allocated for our transportation staff, as you know, has been very difficult to retain our employees because there are sources out there that are paying much more than what we are, anywhere from like $2 to $8 more per hour to employees. So this would be paid annually over the course of their 10-month contract, and we feel that this will help us to retain and continue to attract bus drivers to our school district.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Sorry, Ms. Richards. I just wanted to say I think that's awesome. Obviously, getting those positions filled and being more competitive is great, so thanks.
President Wade, next we have...
If I
I'm
may,
so sorry.
President Wade, Ms. Johnson, I do know that with bus drivers that when they do come and we pay for their license, that in many cases, because other careers offer higher pay, that once they have their CDL license, they can go be a truck driver, they can go be they can drive the what's the trash for the town, and it pays higher. So I do appreciate that we can offer them more money in order to, as an incentive to stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for upcoming events. So we hope you'll join us this Thursday at 4:30 at the HCPA for our Teacher of the Year celebration. I'm reminding everyone that we'll have an elementary Teacher of the Year as well as a secondary Teacher of the Year. So we're excited about that. Also, on May 1st at 9 a.m., we have a school visit to Power Ranch Elementary. And last on upcoming events is the parent event supporting teen mental health. It's a virtual meeting, May 6th at 6 p.m. And that concludes the events.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. This brings us to item 4.1, executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1. I motion that the governing board convene to an executive session pursuant to ARS 431.03A1 for discussion of superintendent's annual evaluation and performance-based pay. That would be Ms. Van Hook, seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. which is the superintendent one.
Madam President, you should reconvene the board meeting, the regular board meeting. So move to reconvene the regular board meeting.
I motion that we reconvene the board meeting. That would be Ms. Jarman seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. All right, this brings us to action item, superintendent's performance-based pay for fiscal year 2024, 2025. Any questions or comments from the board before I make the motion? I motion that the governing board approves the superintendent's performance-based pay in the amount of $6,000. Sarah Jarman seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
Madam President, can we make a comment now? I just wanted to thank Ms. Richards for her service, hanging in for another year. It is appreciated by the staff and the people you work with in the community. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to second that, Ms. Richards. We are very grateful for the time that you have given us.
Thank you. I agree with that.
All right, this brings us to consent agenda items. I motion to approve consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.11. Anna Van Hook seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 4-0. We would like to thank Higley Booster Club, Higley High School Choir Boosters, and Pueblo Mechanical and Controls for their generous donations to the district. At this time, David is going to introduce our new IT director. That was just part of the consent agenda.
Board President Wade, members of the board, it's with my pleasure to announce, and I'll have Robert, I'm going to put you on the spot right here in the middle. Okay, not uncomfortable, there's no anything. But my pleasure to announce that following a comprehensive interview process, Robert Schroep will begin as the Director of IT effective July 1, 2025. If we can give Robert a round of applause. This is a true grow your own. Robert has been a member of our district for the past 17 years and counting. He began his career in 2007 as a Tech 1 at Coronado Elementary School. He later supported Gateway Point Elementary, Williamsfield High School, before advancing to user support supervisor, IT manager, and most recently, he was our assistant director of IT for the past 8 years. We're very, very proud of Robert. During this time, he got a master's degree in cybersecurity, further supporting his commitment to protecting and advancing the district's technology systems. His journey truly reflects a commitment to Higley's core values, and we're excited to one of our own grow and lead. So again, we're very excited for Robert. He's got a couple words that he would like to say.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. First, I want to thank the governing board and HUSD leadership for trusting me with this opportunity. I'm honored and excited to continue serving a district that means so much to me. I also want to take a moment to thank my wife, Christina, who's here tonight. I truly couldn't have gotten here without her love and support, and I'm so grateful to have her by my side. Over the past 17 years, I've had the privilege to grow alongside Higley and the IT department. I look forward to continuing to build upon the strong foundation and vision that has been set, working to deliver innovative, secure, and reliable technology that supports our teachers, staff, and most importantly, our students. I'm excited for what's ahead, and I'm committed to doing everything I can to help Higley continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We are excited to have you. This brings us to item 7.1, presentation on vacant land parcel. Mr. Moore, this would be you.
President Wade, members of the board. Tonight I'm presenting, as I've alluded to earlier in the year, a review of our vacant land that we have. As they pull up the presentation. It's a quick presentation as the land is vacant. There's not a lot to talk about, but I did want to bring forth the options that the board has moving forward to leverage this piece of land to further utilize maybe proceeds or release this parcel for future revenue opportunity for the district. So looking at some basics, where is the land located? So We've always alluded to, this is the land behind Target, the land behind Target. It's actually a little bit farther back behind Target, but it corners the north side of Orchard Lane between Blue Jay Drive and Wren Drive. It's 19.5 acres, currently zoned as industrial, and resides in the town of Gilbert. Oh, went a little too fast. Got a couple of pictures. As I've alluded to, the land is vacant, so not a lot going on at the land. As we look to kind of some options with the land, we're kind of strapped in terms of what we can do statutorily until we have voter approval. And so once the district, or if the board elects to give the district authority to move forward with an election, we would have 3 options in which we can pursue with that vacant piece of land. One being sell. So back in 2022, part of the bond research that I was doing, we did appraise the land. That appraised for $8.6 million. And like I said earlier, it's currently zoned as industrial. So that appraised as industrial. Again, that was in 2022. We can assume that with the market, that value has gone up. But that just gives some context if we were to consider selling it. There's an option to lease. We can research potential leasing partners. And that would create an ongoing revenue stream for the district, which is something that I would prefer if that would be an option, or if the board were to give us authority to put this on the ballot, that would be an option I would bring forth and research heavily, because I feel like ongoing revenue is difficult to come about when we talk about school finance and leveraging resources that we have. So, and the third option is exchange. You could potentially exchange the parcel for another piece of land, but as looking at our demographics and our aging population and the way the district's trending, that option really is not highly of interest, in my opinion, and I don't think it would be the board's interest as well. But those are some basics on our options. Again, we need voter approval to proceed with any of these options. And really, this comes to the conclusion of my presentation. The next steps is later in this agenda, there's an action item for the board to consider, giving the district direction to pursue a resolution. If that direction is given, I could bring that back at the next board meeting, where I have slated to bring back the M&O override resolution. So we can put those 2 on that May 13th board agenda. And then just looking forward as a budget, as a whole, in June 10th and June 24th, we will look to bring forth the proposed and adopted budget for 26, something that we've been working through this whole spring. So with that, it's a short presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
President White, Mr. Moore, I have a lot of questions. So your preferred option is lease because of the ongoing revenue, correct? And so voter approval is not required for leases. Voter approval is required for leases 20 years or more. So under 20 years, it doesn't require voter approval. Do we have an interested party that would lease?
I've had discussions with multiple companies, again, just preliminary, but there is multifamily interest in this, and they would be interested in long-term leasing. They would not want to build an infrastructure with a lease less than 20 years. The adjacent storage facility has also shown interest. Again, there's a lot less interest when the leasing terms are not over an extended period of time, when they're going to be investing infrastructure into that property. So you are correct. The lease, we do have authority to lease anything under 20, but with these companies that I've discussed with or have conversations with, they're looking for a long-term lease if they're going to invest multiple millions of dollars into the property to develop something. So.
And what are we looking at as far as long-term a revenue for such long-term lease?
Yeah, I haven't delved into a lot of that because we don't have authority right now. But I know some recent, Kyrene has a long-term lease for about, I think it's 2 warehouse properties, and they bring in about $800,000 annually in revenue.
Okay. And then as far as the approval, like the ballot measure wording, I'm just curious, like how either we as a board or the community would be able to vote for something like that with it so open-ended. Like there's no, it's not like specific as to what we plan on doing. So how do we expect that to go on the ballot so that it's clear for the community?
Well, I think that can be up to the board on how you want to write that language in the resolution. Typically, like you would give yourself some options to express either, I think Gilbert just did this on their ballot last year, but it has sell, lease, or exchange on that language. You would list the exact parcel that we are talking about, so it'd be very clear to the community that we're talking about this parcel of land, because that has to be very strategic or very formally written into the ballot initiative. But the language is in the resolution, and I would recommend keeping it the option to sell, lease, or exchange, just in case maybe it's maybe it's more advantageous for us to sell instead of lease. But again, that is determined in the resolution. So on May 13th, you can modify that language in the resolution if you so choose.
Okay. And then will the draft lease or sales contract be shared publicly before the vote?
So the order of kind of the process would be, 1, getting authority to sell, lease, or exchange the property, then bring forth back to the board a lease agreement, a sale agreement. So there would be multiple steps in which this process is publicly shared and brought forth, and the board brought forth along in the process with approvals. So.
And then will we have the opportunity to allow the community to, like a Q&A session for them to ask questions as far as what the terms would be?
I think if we got down to the point of narrowing down to one partner or one vendor per se, certainly that individual or that company could come help solicit or coordinate that Q&A session if there was concern over what was being proposed for that property.
And then in the case of a lease, who bears the maintenance costs?
That would be written out in the terms of that lease agreement. And so obviously with our limited staff, we would want that leaseor to bear a lot of the burden with regard to that property. We may receive less revenue, but at least we won't have that overhead to manage or oversee that. But again, that's kind of down the road when we establish an individual or company to negotiate with.
Yeah, because right now there's no cost to the district for the lot, and so.
Well, we do have to mow it and maintain. So we do have a little bit of a cost for our grounds to upkeep it a little bit.
Cut the weeds.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a concern for me as far as like property like management more than just weed cutting. That's definitely something to consider. And then as far as like depending on what they decide to do with that property, as far as like environmental liabilities, that would then be inherited by the district?
No, I think a lot of that would be delineated in whatever lease agreement and we can, with help of our attorney, we can help draft that to where we limit our liability with whatever is being proposed or proposed for that lot. So.
And then we discussed this last time, but those funds can only be applied to capital, correct?
So yeah, if you sell it, so that has to go to the school plant, and then there's a formula, it's kind of complex, but you have to pay down a portion of your outstanding debt. If you lease it, those lease funds can be, established to go to the school plant fund. They can only be used for capital purposes, but the intention would be, as you know, we have this large lease burden already, so maybe we can reduce that payment with offsetting these revenue lease funds, so.
So can the lease, if we sell it, those funds can go to pay down our bonds, correct?
A portion has to legally, our outstanding bond debt, yeah. But that is
Can we do that
one-time
with a
funds.
lease, or lease as well?
We could prepay, but that would be at the district's discretion, so there's no mandate on that piece.
What prevents the district from being locked into leases that block future expansion?
Not sure how,
Just, let's say down the road, the district grows and we want the property back, then, and we're signed into a 20-year lease.
yeah, so typically leases or agreements have termination clauses, and so again, working with our district attorney, we'd want to make sure that's advantageous for the district to have a term clause in there that we can execute and potentially quickly, right, utilize that land again, so.
Okay, so we could have language in there to be able to take that back if needed. And then also in situations if the leasee defaults, we can have language in there as far as how quickly we can repurpose the land.
Yeah, again, kind of looking down the road, yeah, we can flesh a lot of that out with whatever potential individual will be coming in to lease this land.
And then will the district retain partial ownership?
We'll still remain 100% owner if we lease it. If we sell it, then we revoke, then we completely.
And then as far as there's laws as far as the usage of the land, correct? As far as like restrictions on what could be built on that land?
So it's currently zoned as industrial, right? But if a lease company comes in and say they want to do multifamily, they would have to work with the town of Gilbert to rezone that property. So the district would not be involved in that process. That would be somebody, the leaseor would, if they wanted to pursue that avenue, they would have to rezone that, right? So again, that kind of down the road, but like we would not be involved in trying to rezone that ourselves.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
President Wade, thank you so much for this information. These are great questions. Just out of curiosity, how much was this purchased by the district?
So I don't know the history of it, but I believe it was traded at one point. Maybe Scott, Mr. Glover. There was a trade, yeah, with the church, and so somehow we got this parcel.
Perhaps because of the ward that was built right there by Bridges, but that's a guess.
Yeah, I think Bridges' lot was split, and they
Yes.
gave us this parcel to build their ward on the, what would that be, the east side of Bridges?
Okay, thank you so much. And yes, just that liability factor. So is it similar like landlord insurance and then the tenant has tenant insurance, kind of similar to that layout for insurance purposes?
Yeah, I would have the district covered in this agreement to where the liabilities on the leaseor,
Okay.
and try to limit our risk with, again, the limited overhead that we have and expertise in anything outside school district from my scope of work. I want to put that on the leaseor and that liability. Again, there may be a management company in between that and it may reduce our revenue, but at least we don't have that overhead or that burden to be managing something that we're not equipped to manage, so.
Okay, thank you so much for being conscious of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for that presentation. This brings us to 7.2, IHA, Basic Instructional Program, first read. Mr. Armstrong, you're up.
President Wade, members of the board, tonight we're bringing policy IHA to you, and if you scroll all the way down, it's just a couple of adjustments in terms of the instruction that's taking place regarding Holocaust and other genocides, as well as 9/11 Education Day. It has been enacted that there are grade level specific pieces to it, so you'll see that it now states on at least 2 separate occasions during any grades 7 through 12, and that's both with instruction on Holocaust and the 9/11 Education Day.
President Wade, do you happen to know the bill number related to these changes?
The bill number, I don't have that, but it's under the law that's referred to. It's 15701 and then 15710.
Okay, I was just curious what the bill number was, but I'll figure it out. Thank you.
Yeah, may I, Madam President? Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of this change, and you know, as somebody who in 8th grade taught the Holocaust, and a few years ago when they put genocide down to 7th grade, I thought, oof, man, you know, sometimes we teach kids things that are really, really very serious at a very young age. So I think this allows for a little bit more common sense and discretion as to when to introduce some of these very sensitive topics. And the same thing, you know, teaching 9/11 to 6th graders that didn't live it it's important, but I don't, you know, I just don't think they should see people leaping to their deaths at that grade level, which is kind of, people were just all over the place. So it seems a little bit more reasonable for kids who are ready to accept it. So anyway, I just wanted to speak out in support of that change.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. This brings us to 8.1, direct district administration to proceed with land sale, lease, or exchange. Any questions or comments before I motion? I motion that the governing board authorize district administration to proceed with drafting a land sale, lease, or exchange resolution.
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just want to make sure we're just approving to do one of the following, and then the final worded resolution will come back to the board.
May 13th, yeah.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. This brings us to 8.2, tentative approval of the 25-26 capital outlay budget. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, President Wade, members of the board, this capital budget is the budget that I presented to the board at the last meeting, with the exception of one change. We had added a line item for participatory budgets. This is something Mr. Armstrong will come back to the board and share at a further meeting on how this will be, I would say, pursued or shared with our schools. And then this is something Queen Creek does with providing a capital budget for schools and their student council or their student groups to come up with school projects. And so that $75,000 was pulled from the major projects line item. So that is the only change from the original presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board before I motion? I motion that the governing board tentatively approve the fiscal year 2026 capital outlay budget.
Second.
Ms. Van Hook seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. This brings us to item 8.3, approval of RFP number 25-01-30, athletic trainer service. Do we have any questions or comments from the board before I motion?
I do have one question. Do we get consent from parents ahead of time for them to be treated by the trainers?
Board Member Van Hook, yeah, when you go do your athletic packet, that's part of what you're doing when you sign the athletic packet, is so that when you go to register, that we are able to treat in case there is an emergency that's happening on that. And so when you go through that register my athlete, in there, you're giving us consent. And then what we do is take that information, because you have your physical, all that information, and then the trainers get that as well, so that we can appropriately address if there's concerns that come up.
Okay. And I forget, but is there an option to opt out of being treated?
That would be very, very rare. As far as I understand, that's not an option to come out being treated by the athletic trainer for injuries or anything. I would encourage any parents that have concerns to talk to the athletic directors at the site and or the trainer if there's a concern that's coming forward. But we do provide athletic training services. We think it's really important to help protect our athletes. As we know, especially, there's lots of sports that have a lot of physical contact. We want to make sure that we keep them safe. And so the goal of providing this RFP is to increase the amount of coverage to actually make it safer for our kids, as well as providing more direct support for our middle schools. And so we're really excited about expanding the coverage for our kids through the athletic trainer RFP and working with one company to cover all 4 of the secondary schools.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure that if a parent for some reason decides that they don't want the treatment, that there is an option for them to be able to opt out. Thank you.
Not bad. I motion that the governing board approve RFP number 25-01-30 for athletic trainer services to Phoenix Children's. Ms. Van Hook, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. This brings us to 8.4, delegation of authority to execute requests for certification and assurances issued by the Arizona Department of Education regarding eligibility for federal grant funding. I actually have something I would like to say first, and then we can open it. That's because it's time for questions or comments. So look, I'm having a hard time with this executive order from the President of the United States that demands we follow Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which states, quote, "No person in the United States shall on the ground of race, color, or national origin be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance," end quote. So if we say as a collective society, like the Civil Rights Act does here, that we no longer can legally discriminate against specific individuals from accessing privileges granted to others in society, we by legislative design are then legally required to be inclusive. And now that we are inclusive, we have more students present thanks to this newfound inclusivity in our public schools, we create a more diverse environment. Since we now have more folks here with varying backgrounds and experiences that we are legally obligated to provide for, as public education rightfully should be, we can better utilize our tools to learn how to be more equitable when providing for this diverse and inclusive society. The idea that all of our students can have the opportunity to thrive can be realized. Ms. McLennan, correct me if I'm wrong, public education institutions like that of the Higley Unified School District have been legally obligated to follow the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and any subsequent Supreme Court cases that have further defined what this law means since its passing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And furthermore, Ms. McLennan, any instance of a violation on Higley's part would mean that Higley could have been sued since its passing in 1964. Is that correct? If we violated this?
So typically, Ms. Wade, Madams of the Governing Board, typically the suit would be precluded unless there was a claim filed with the EEOC or the Office of Civil Rights prior. But once those prerequisites were met, correct, you have been subject to that.
Thank you. So we've been beholden to this law. This has been, again, have been true for all public education institutions since its passing in 1964. Over the course of the last 61 years, we have collectively moved towards a public education system that is more equitable and inclusive, which has a direct result in our education system becoming more diverse. We continue to improve because continued marginalized groups pushed under the Civil Rights Act to expand or further changes. So for example, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, the use of individualized education plans, or IEP. We also have Title IX restrictions that says we have to spend the same amount of money on sports regardless of gender. These are all things that are going back to more equitable practices as a result of the Civil Rights Act. I would like to now look at the later part of this agenda item. It states, quote, "Given the text of Title VI and the assurances you have already given, any violation of Title VI, including the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs to advantage one's race over another is impermissible. The use of DEI practices can violate federal law. The continued use of illegal DEI practices may subject the individual or entity using such practices to serious consequences." And then I'm going to paraphrase here. Those consequences are termination of funds or potential litigation, end quote. I wish to repeat, it states, including the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to advantage one's race over another. In no way does DEI anything provide advantage of one race over another. DEI quite literally provides more equity regardless of demographics, which race is included in this. Of note, at no point do we have any definition, either from our current administration or even Superintendent Horn, on what they actually mean by DEI. It seems to be a more I will know it when I see it type of approach. With the absence of clear definition in these demands, they can now start to say anything that they do not agree with looks like DEI. Currently, this administration, as well as our state superintendent, have set out threatening letters expressing that they will withhold for funds for doing DEI practices, again, without a definition of what that means. They demand we follow a law, Civil Rights Act of 1964, while simultaneously pushing to end the very practices that have granted public education systems the ability to actually honor that law in the first place. I request every person here logically ask yourselves, what is the intended outcome of removing diversity, equity, and inclusion? Knowing what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 states and how that piece of legislation that all public institutions are obligated to follow and have been obligated to follow, legislation that legally mandates we are inclusive in the education we provide, which again, from actual inclusion, we as a society have become more diverse and as a result, more equitable. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the very thing they are using to target DEI programs, the foundational piece of legislation, is in of itself diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI programs are the direct result of a society that honors the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and public education today is centered around serving diverse society with equitable practices, and it includes all learners. At the end of the day, for the board, I'm going to recommend that we sign both of these, because education as a whole, and more specifically here at Higley Unified School District, we are held to a standard of not discriminating against any group or individual as dictated by the Civil Rights Act of '64. And we as an organization, as well as myself as a board member, are committed to doing this. However, I feel compelled as the career history and government teacher in me wishes to warn every single person that the opposite of diversity is uniformity, the opposite of equity is inequity, and the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. The demand to remove DEI practices under the guise that we are protecting from discrimination is only going to have the direct result of bringing about uniformity, inequity, and exclusion.
Thank you, President Wade. May I? I agree with well said, what you said, and I also just want to go on the record. I'm sorry to take a little time to do this, but it's important for me as a history teacher, as a dad, as a citizen, as somebody who's visited Auschwitz and visited Japanese American internment camps here within our state, to be on the record of where I stand. So last Friday night, we did receive a letter from the Arizona Department of Ed that I felt, and some would disagree, I think, but I felt it was not at all a collaborative tone. I found it upsetting. I found it unsettling. But I think, you know, we're really arguing about somewhat saying the same thing, so I want to try to maybe find some common ground here. We get hung up on letters and political theater, which sort of really does disrupt our mission here, which is teaching kids. That's what I get up every day to do. You know, we have preschool to 12th graders. And I just wanted to touch on some of the foundations of modern American school. We take everybody, and it's been a fight to get there. All races, colors, creeds, abilities, we take them all. And I love that. We don't discriminate. You know, I grew up believing, and I still believe in the great American melting pot. You know, another thing you learn as you learn the foundations of modern American modern American public ed is that we had, at one time, huge numbers of immigrants, including some of my ancestors, who can still remember times when there were signs on stores that said Irish need not apply. So one of the missions of our system, of our public education system, was to teach people our language, our history, our culture, how our government works. And we teach and we say the Pledge of Allegiance all the time. We're the ones, we're teachers are the ones that teach the kids. And we end with liberty and justice for all. I say it every day at least once. We're the ones that teach those kids how to make little turkey hands at Thanksgiving. Some of the American traditions that we love. We teach them who signed the Declaration of Independence, who wrote the Constitution, and about, all the different people who have sacrificed over the years for the freedoms that we hold and enjoy. I don't like the implication that teachers are acting ever in any un-American way. That really galls me. I gave up a lot to be a teacher. And it's aged me. It's a hard job, but I wanted to give back to my country. That was my way of service. So I just hope that we can get past some of these things and get back to letting teachers inspire our learners, fostering their interests, teaching them how to be good citizens who give back and are proud to be Americans. So if this vote will affirm my pledge to not discriminate, then I too will vote yes.
I motion that the governing board delegate authority to Superintendent Sherry Richards to execute the request for certification and assurances issued by the Arizona Department of Education pertaining to compliance with requirements of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment in order to preserve eligibility for federal grant funding.
I will second.
Ms. Van Hook said it, but not on the mic, so I will write down Van Hook for second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to just read something with my vote, please. This applies to the FERPA assurance. The importance of signing this document is to ensure that the district adheres to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, and to maintain access to federal grant funds. Parents have a right to inspect, review their children's educational records, and this agreement ensures that the district acknowledges and respects this right. By signing, the district commits to not withholding information about the health and safety of children from their parents, providing annual FERPA rights notifications, and informing parents about military recruiters' access to student information with an opt-out option. From my experience, the district has violated FERPA laws, and I'm hoping that going forward, that does not happen again, and we can ensure that we follow this as strictly as possible. And with that, I vote aye.
Motion carries 4-0. 8.5, consideration of resolution regarding equal education opportunities and guidance from U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. Do we have any comments or questions from the board before I motion?
President Wade, I would like to read the resolution. Whereas discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin is illegal and morally reprehensible. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, and other relevant authorities prohibit discrimination based on the basis of race, color, or national origin. Whereas Title VI specifically states that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of, be excluded from participating in, being denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Whereas all students are entitled to a school environment free from discrimination. Whereas race-based decision-makings, no matter the form, remains impermissible. Whereas on February 14th, 2025, the Acting Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights issued a Dear Colleague letter clarifying and reaffirming the non-discrimination obligations of schools and other entities that receive federal financial assistance from the department. Whereas the district intends to fully comply with and abide by the law as outlined in the letter. Be it resolved that Higley Unified School Governing Board has determined that it will take all reasonable measures to ensure that its policies and actions comply with existing civil rights laws, prohibit any efforts to circumvent prohibitions on the use of race by relying on proxies or other indirect means to accomplish such ends, and prohibit use by the district of third-party contractors, clearinghouses, or aggregators in an effort to circumvent prohibited uses of race. Be it further resolved that the district shall abide by all applicable state and federal laws, rules, regulations, executive orders, and department guidance with respect to provisions of equal educational opportunities, and shall not discriminate against any person based upon that person's race, color, religion, disability, pregnancy and parenting, sex, national origin, veteran status, and genetic code. Adopted by the Governing Board of Higley Unified School District Number 60 at a regular open meeting of public held today. There you go.
Ms. McLennan, we already have policies in place that essentially are affirming that we are following the Civil Rights Act of '64 in terms of anti-discrimination policies in both hiring practice as well as what we expect from our staff. Is that correct?
Madam President, members of the board, that's correct. You have Governing Board Policy AC, Governing Board Policy ACA, and some of the Governing Board policies in Section G of your personnel practices that address those issues.
Okay, so we are already covered. Essentially, that some of this would be redundant. Is that correct?
It would mirror your existing policies.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments before I motion? I motion that the Governing Board consider the adoption of a resolution as presented. Ms. Van Hook seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed?
No.
Nay. So if it is 2-2, we just continue living our lives at the present. Is that correct?
The matter didn't pass.
Okay, thank you.
President Wade, I'd like to read something. I just want to let the record show that this board had the opportunity to affirm its commitment to treating every student equally under the law without exception, and to stand firmly against form of race-based discrimination. Despite that, board member Wade and Glover have chosen to vote no. That vote speaks for itself. As a board member, I will continue to stand for fairness, transparency, and equal opportunity for all our students, and I will ensure that any violations of these principles are reported, because there is no place for discrimination practices in any of our schools against any of our students. Thank you.
For the record, we just affirmed in item 8.4 that we attest that we are following the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as FERPA laws, and I just communicated with our legal that we already have policies in place to do so. I cannot speak for Mr. Glover, and I will allow you the opportunity to do that, but as I stated previously, I too am committed to ensuring that our environment that is diverse maintains equitability for all of our students, and that no person is discriminated against when seeking employment or by their employer, or if you are a student, by any of the teachers or staff that you interact with. Item 8.6, approval of overnight and out-of-state staff travel. Any questions or comments from the board?
I can say, Madam President. This is where it's kind of sticky because I like to keep as much in the M&O as I can. And so it's hard because some of these out-of-state expenses, they just start, to be frank, they just start adding up. And when you're kind of like facing, kind of some cuts with the teachers, this is an opportunity to kind of, maybe get some of the slack out, maybe cut some of the bulk out. So if we can really push forward as we move forward, if we can really maybe utilize these opportunities to do more in-house training or cheaper Zoom options, which are available since COVID, this is really adding up. It's 11,000, I believe I calculated. So that is about a portion of teachers' pay. So that could go potentially in the district, stay in the M&O, and go towards teachers' pay. So I really think that this might be an area that we can improve on. It's not my favorite. I do agree with some professional development, but we really kind of got to find that balance where we're being very mindful of the budget. So I just wanted to express that concern.
I motion that the governing board approve the overnight and out-of-state staff travel request as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to explain my vote, please. Again, we talked about this at the last meeting with using taxpayer dollars on organizations that promote DEI, and the Cisco San Diego and the National Schools to Watch conferences, both, they have a keynote speaker that's all about it, and same applies to the organization hosting the Cisco Live. And so I again, we have a state law that says we can't use taxpayer funds to pay such organizations, and we're doing it here again. So with that, I vote no.
So all those opposed? Thank you. Motion fails 2-2. 8.7, ratify payroll and expense voucher 1123. Any questions or comments from the board before I motion?
President Wade, I'd like to know when this agreement was signed, this IGA. Do you know?
Member Van Hook, I don't have that exact date on me, but I can find that and present it to the board.
Was it approved by the board, or was it signed without board approval?
I believe at some point all IGAs are approved by the board. I just have to go back and find that date. So.
Yeah, I looked through board docs under several different titles, and nothing came up. But I have, obviously we have an IGA and an agreement that we've made, and so I understand that we have an obligation under this agreement, but spending $12,000 on a lobbyist partnership, I believe takes funds away from the classroom, our staff, and our students. Our priority should always be direct support for teachers and learning and our students, not government lobbying. We already have organizations like ASBA and ASBO that do lobbying on behalf of public schools. So I don't understand why we're duplicating efforts for another layer of, money going out to these lobbyist organizations. I don't, what are we actually getting for the money? Would be interesting to know. I don't know if we as a district can prove any like tangible wins that we've had by paying this organization, or any measurable outcomes. You know, especially when we're tightening up the budget, you know, every dollar counts, and I just can't justify $12,000 going to, for lobbying. And also as elected officials, we are supposed to be the voice for our district, and I know that I am, you know, I speak to our legislators all the time as far as things that would benefit our district. And so, you know, we need to, parents elected us to be their voice instead of lobbyists. And so I just have a concern, and I hope that like in the future that we can reconsider renewing such an agreement, because, and I mean, I know that there's also a lot of schools that participate, and when they go and lobby for certain things, like what benefits one school might not benefit our district. So something to consider. Thank you.
So, Ms. Van Hook, we can look for the date and then list the potential benefits that have been, you know, observed, or I think there's a strong financial group of individuals that collaborate in that particular group, but it would be good for y'all to know. So we'll put it in status.
Thank you for that, Ms. Richards. Something else I wish to express, the way our political system is structured by nature, lobbying is part of that system. And if we are individuals, so for example, being duly elected individuals like that of our legislators that we would be lobbying here, having multiple organizations reach out or multiple voices saying the same thing gives weight outright. So yes, it is great that we have the ASBA looking out for us, as well as organizations that are doing things on behalf of public education. But if I were a legislator, having the voice of said public education systems as well only further gives weight to things that we have talked about or things that directly impact us. And so it is important to keep in mind that the collective idea of that shows benefits. There are a number of ways in which we have successfully lobbied for things that have led to a lot of changes for us, or for example, the AEL that we talk about routinely, and the idea of that every year this potential funding is held hostage. This is where lobbying matters, right? And so getting your voices heard and all of those things, it is not necessarily the idea that a dollar spent to try to gain things later is always beneficial, and the collective of that. And so I'm appreciative that we work with other districts when doing that. So thank you, and I look forward to that information and status as well.
I'm going to say something, President Wade. I love the idea of just kind of looking at this and reassessing in the future. A lot of the community is watching our efforts right now. They're watching which direction we go. And the fact is you have a lot of the community who are seeking education elsewhere. So I really want to encourage the district to kind of look at things at, to be frank, parents don't want politics in their kids' classrooms. And so we got to utilize these opportunities to kind of just see where we can kind of rein it back a little bit and get straight to academics and see what extra attachments we have, because this is strings of money that pull out of the district, pull out of certain things that we can utilize more in the districts, in the classrooms. So if we can kind of just be proactive and reassess, and just be mindful of what serves all, and kind of just, let politics be where they matter, but majority of the community does not want it in the classroom. So just to be mindful of that, if that makes sense. Thank you.
I motion that the governing board ratifies the payroll and expense voucher 1123.
Second.
Mr. Glover seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Future agenda items. This agenda item is for the governing board to have a running record for potential items to be placed on future agenda. Does anyone have any requests for future agenda items?
But Madam President, can I make a remark before we close? Just one. Relevant. With
We need to be circumspect, Mr. Glover, with any, we need to only ask for future agenda items here.
Madam President, I would maybe like a follow-up about the PE, just where they leave count for PE hours off the campus, just kind of a follow-up with that, how it's doing.
That won't come till next year, though? Is that what you're meaning, like how it goes,
Okay.
or where that, yeah, it'll be for next school year?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Great. All right. I motion to adjourn the meeting. Ms. Van Hook, seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Meeting adjourned.